Hey, good morning. Uh, Things are probably only going to be getting more challenging here interpersonally as we are start kind of slowly re-entering into normal relationships here in the coming weeks, right? So here in Minnesota, still under the stay-at-home order for another couple weeks, but as Governor Walz is adjusting the dials and as things will start to loosen up, we're going to start seeing the result of relationships and the friction that come along with those as we start rubbing together and have strong convictions about how things should be playing out moving forward and the ways that we should handle ourselves going forward and the things that we attend and what we wear and don't wear and how close we interact and whether we shake hands or elbow bump or something. Things are probably going to get more challenging interpersonally. And as we look at today's passage, I think there's help here and a good exhortation for us to be keeping in mind as we move forward in these coming weeks. I was especially helped. A friend of mine in Michigan, a pastor friend, had shared a similar exhortation to his congregation of just a caution of being on guard for the very thing that I think Paul is exhorting us to consider in today's passage. So let's look here at Galatians 5:13 through 15. Paul has been making the clear argument for 5 chapters that we are not obliged to keep the law. We are not under the law as Christians. We don't have to do the law. That's not where our hope for justification resides. And he makes an important pivot here in verse 13. So let me read Galatians 5:13 to 15. Paul says, "For you were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another." All right, so he's been making this point very clear. You are called to freedom, right? As Christians, as brothers, you are called to freedom. It is for freedom that Christ has set you free. Galatians 5 verse 1. You're not under the law. You are not bound to do the law, to keep the law. You are free. 5 chapters of arguing for that, of making the case, the multifaceted case for freedom. So here's the caution. Don't use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh. Don't use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh. Yes, you are free. You can eat and drink and do all kinds of things. You're free to do that. But be careful that it does not give an opportunity for the flesh. And this phrase clearly has as an ethical, moral component, right? He's not just talking about our bodies. He's not just talking like this dualistic breakdown of you've got the spiritual religious realm where you might have freedom, but then on the physical earthly side, you would be not bound. You'd be free. Right? He's not talking like that. He's talking about sin, that you can use your freedom for which Christ died and rose again. You can use your freedom for sin. That's what he's after here with the flesh, right? The sinful nature is what he means by that word. You can use your freedom for an opportunity to sin, right? So exerting your freedom over and against your more conscience-bound brother or sister in Christ is sin. It's sinful of you to exert your freedom in that kind of a way. So he's calling for us to be on guard for this, to be watchful, to make sure that we're not exercising our freedom in a sinful way. And I think his example, Paul's example here, is demonstrating that those who are more free, just like we see the Apostle Paul is, those who are more free, right? He was a Pharisee of Pharisees, and yet he's the one arguing for freedom, not law keeping. His opponents are more bound than he is. Sorry, so he's very free. We see this in Romans 14 as well. He is free to eat and drink anything, right? And yet he is the one who's the most vocal here in calling for us to not express that freedom. To not express the freedom. The one who is free is the most vocal in calling for that freedom to be expressed in proper boundaries. Right? And some might say that that's no longer freedom, that's restriction, but real freedom, as Paul is demonstrating, is not the expression of that freedom in every circumstance. Real freedom is the ability to lay down your freedom. It's the ability to lay down your freedom to serve your brother, as Paul says at the end of verse 13. You are to use your freedom through love to serve one another. That's the purpose of your freedom. As you interact with brothers and sisters in the Lord who are more conscience bound, you are given freedom to love and serve them, to lay your freedom down, to say, okay, yeah, I will abstain from that food or that drink or that activity. I will abstain for that to serve you so that it's not a stumbling block. So there's no hindrance here in our relationship, so that most importantly, the gospel continues unhindered. And look at what he does to make this point. Verse 14, he goes to the law, right? He's been hammering it home. You are not obligated to keep the law. And verse 14, he says, you are free, but don't use your freedom as an opportunity in the flesh, because the law is fulfilled in one word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So he uses the law as an argument that we're no longer under the law. This is a wonderful display of Paul communicating his freedom as it relates to the law, that he is free to look to the law of God for wisdom and guidance and direction while not submitting himself again to a yoke of slavery. He can quote Leviticus 19:18, as he does here: you shall love your neighbor as yourself, in the affirmative, saying, yes, this is what God would have us to do. This is pleasing in the sight of the Lord, that we would love the other like ourselves, love the other brother, other sister like ourselves. We don't have to learn how to love ourselves. That comes far too easily. But we do need to strive to love others. So he's calling us to fulfill the law here, to fulfill Leviticus 19:18, while not submitting to the yoke of slavery of the law. Right? So it's a display of freedom, of how Paul is relating to the law. Because if we don't express our freedom in this kind of a way that he's both calling for and demonstrating, we run a great danger. A danger that is far greater than limitations on our freedom. Verse 15, if you bite and devour one another, right? This is what this looks like when we are not expressing our freedom in a positive way. When we are using our freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, we're biting and devouring one another, right? As those who are free and those who are bound are coming after each other, it's going to be mutually self-destructive. Watch out. Here's the key imperative here. Watch out that you're not consumed by one another, right? One group is not going to win out over the other. Both are going to be destroyed. Both are going to suffer and be demolished. Both are done for. So we need to be on guard. Christian, we need to be watchful of our freedom, that we aren't using this freedom for an opportunity for the flesh, for sinful purposes. And so as we consider this warning, as we look at Galatians 5:13 through 15, I think we need to pay attention here, that this is a fitting word for us in the time that we find ourselves. That in these coming weeks, there will be opportunity to express vocally, vehemently our convictions. Right? Whether we agree or disagree with the very directives and guidance that's being provided by multiple levels of those in authority. We need to be prepared for these coming weeks, that as we slowly resume social functions, I think especially resuming the life of the local church as God has intended for it to be together, not online, that we be on guard of our freedom. That we be careful now so that we're prepared then to relate to one another in love, that we would serve one another. Because Christian, you are sinfully wrong to impose your convictions about how to re-engage in normal life. And that swings both ways. You are sinfully wrong to impose your convictions about how to re-engage in normal life. It goes both directions, right? To those who would be more restrictive and to those who would be more loose. Saying the other is dead wrong and being ugly in how we're interacting, that's given opportunity for the flesh, opportunity for sin. So how in these coming weeks will the Christian community display a distinct unity that the Son of God died for? How will we display that unity in these coming weeks? What will our online dialogue look like? When we finally get to be back together, how will we relate to one another? Will there be behind the scene conversations, behind backs of judgmentalism and whatever gossip might be given opportunity to spread? So, Christian, given your convictions and given your co-union in Christ with other Christians, we have to ask ourselves, I need to ask myself, how can I use my freedom? How can I use my convictions to serve the other brother or sister in the Lord, rather than belittle them or berate them or condemn them? Christ died to bring us together. So it is necessary for us to do what Paul is calling for us to do here in Galatians 5:13. Through love, serve one another. Whether that's in expressing our freedom or laying down our freedom in love for someone else.